Hi friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. In today's video, I'm going to give you some recommendations for easy nonfiction books for beginners. If you are intimidated by nonfiction or you're not sure where to start, I've got some ideas for you. I've seen videos like this from some other great channels, and I will link some of the inspiration down below so you can go and check them out as well. But in today's video, I wanted to give some of my recommendations if you want a way to get into nonfiction. If you find nonfiction books to be intimidating, my first recommendation is try something with pictures. This could be a graphic novel. Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi is a great example of this. It's her memoir of growing up in Iran during the revolution, and it's a fantastic series of graphic novels that are nonfiction. Another great option is The Best We Could Do by Thi Bui. This one actually won the American Book Award, and again, it's a memoir in graphic novel format. So if all of the words are what you find intimidating, something with pictures can be a great way to get through it. And this is another really fantastic one. It documents the story of the author's family escaping from 1970s Vietnam and going through a lot of really difficult circumstances leading up to the author's life as an adult woman. Another great example is March by John Lewis. These are following his history in the civil rights movement. And again, it's a graphic memoir. It's nonfiction, but it's told in a way that is really accessible. Other options with pictures are things like this collection of graphic biographies, Noisemakers, 25 Women Who Raised Their Voices and Changed the World, a graphic collection. It's written for a middle grade audience, and this is one of actually a bunch of different books that are quite similar that have short biographies of interesting people. In this case, it also has artwork, so there's a bunch of different female artists who illustrated, which was really cool. And it's nonfiction, you'll learn something, there are pictures, it's not too intimidating. And if you're a parent, these are nice because they're also something that you can share with your children, because often they're targeted at a younger audience. But honestly, every time I read something like this, I learn something new as well. And my final recommendation, if you want to try something with more pictures, is something akin to a coffee table book. This is a great example, even though this is a smaller version and you can get bigger coffee table books. But if you're interested in fashion, there's this really cool line of books by Vogue where they focus on a particular designer. This is one about Christian Dior, and it's got lots of photos along with text. So it's a little less intimidating. You can look at the pictures, you can read some text, you're reading a nonfiction book, but again, it's a little bit easier to get through and you're getting the visuals along with it. And speaking of reading books targeted at a younger audience, another great place to start with nonfiction is reading books for a YA audience. One example of this is Stamped: Racism, Anti-Racism, and You by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi, which is a YA adaptation of Stamped from the Beginning. A book that is brilliant, that I highly recommend if you're able to get to it, but if you want something that's less dense and less intimidating, trying something that's been adapted for a YA audience can be a really good way to go. This is a fantastic book dealing with race in America, the history of racist ideas, and anti-racism, and the audiobook is fantastic as well. Jason Reynolds does the audiobook, and I loved it. And just in general, audiobooks for nonfiction might be a great way to try to get into them, because especially if it's narrative nonfiction, it feels like listening to a podcast because it's nonfiction information, and that also might be a good way to get into it. Another YA nonfiction title that is phenomenal is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. This is a memoir of growing up queer and Black in America, and it is amazing. I highly recommend it. It's written for a teen audience, so it's very accessible, it's very personal, but it's nonfiction. You're reading a memoir, you're going to get something out of it. And I love nonfiction. I think nonfiction is an important part of a reading diet. You know, it can help to try to find topics that interest you. And while we're on the topic of memoirs, another great option is to find out if one of your favorite celebrities or politicians has written a memoir. It's a person you're already interested in. A lot of times they will read the audiobooks themselves, which is a whole lot of fun, and I really enjoy that. Tan France from Queer Eye has a memoir that is fantastic, and he reads the audio himself, so I think that is a really great example. Another one that's more political is Becoming by Michelle Michelle Obama. Again, she reads the audiobook herself. It's a really fantastic book. It's very accessible. The first half in particular, I think, will be really relatable to a lot of people. That can be a great way to go. A lot of celebrities do write memoirs, and again, you can get the audiobook from Audible or from your library, and you're on your way reading nonfiction. Another entry point for this genre is reading something practical that is about a topic you're interested in. If you're into science, there's a lot of nonfiction written by scientists that you could get into. I have some other interests, so I'm going to share a couple examples that I have found. One is that I am very interested in the history of women writers. I am also interested in the history of genre fiction. So a nonfiction book that I loved was Monster, She Wrote, The Women Who Pioneered Horror and Speculative Fiction. This was so interesting, and it's a really great reference book. It's organized chronologically and has brief biographies of women who pioneered in some way in the horror and speculative fiction genres. There was a lot that I learned about these women that was fascinating, and the other great thing about this is it has book recommendations. So for each author, it'll give some suggestions of places to start. So if you're into reading horror or you're into reading speculative fiction and you want to discover some new classics that you might not have known about, as well as some more modern authors you might not have known about, something like this can be a great entry point that is nonfiction. Another example is if you are into fandom, you could read something like The Fangirl's Guide to the Universe, a handbook for girl geeks by Sam Maggs. This is clearly targeted at a YA audience, but it's a lot of fun. It's really easy to read. It's got infographics and like different ways of presenting information and pictures. And it's a great sort of fandom 101. This is a nice place to start. If you're wanting to just kind of dip your toes into fandom communities, if you want to learn a little bit more about what it's like to go to a convention post-COVID, this could be a great nonfiction title to pick up. That's a lot of fun, tongue-in-cheek, and easy to read. My next set of recommendations is for people who are intimidated by the length of nonfiction titles. Easy fix for this is go short. Read short nonfiction books that you can get through pretty easily, or try reading a collection of essays where you can take it one essay at a time. A classic example of this is A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis. It's very short, so it doesn't take long to get through, but it's a beautiful and moving depiction of dealing with grief after the loss of his wife to cancer. So especially if you're in a time in your life where you're dealing with the loss of people, this might be a great book to pick up. And again, it's short, it's not very long, but it's really good. Another short but wonderful option is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is written as a letter to his son, and it's addressing issues of race and racism in America. It's fantastic. It's not very long. Like, this is a pretty small book, and it was even a National Book Award winner. So it's short and sweet and to the point, but really moving and meaningful and well worth your time. Lastly, if you want a collection of essays, you might try something like Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. This is a modern classic of nonfiction that I think is phenomenal. Audre Lorde is a queer Black feminist writer and thinker, and she has a lot of really fascinating, thought-provoking things to say. Reading Sister Outsider, I could definitely see how a lot of her ideas and discussions have bled into more modern feminist works, especially by Black women authors, and I just found that really fascinating. My final recommendation to you, if you want a way to get into nonfiction, is try reading something that's written in a more narrative style. I have a couple of examples of this, but if you search narrative nonfiction, you're probably going to find a whole lot more. These are books that are written in a more narrative voice, more the way that fiction is written. So if you're a big fiction reader and you feel like nonfiction is too dry, picking something that is written in a more narrative style might work out well for you. The two examples I'm going to give are Hunger, A Memoir of My Body by Roxane Gay. And in general, I would say Roxane Gay's books are really great. She does have some fiction, but she also writes quite a bit of nonfiction. And the style that she writes in is very fluid. It's very narratively driven. And I think her writing is phenomenal. I think this is a really, really good book. If you need content warnings, do check them because she gets into some intense and heavy material, but this is a great option. Another really great one that's kind of experimental in the degree degree to which it draws on fictional narrative structures is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is her memoir of being in an abusive relationship with another woman, and it's intense but really powerful, really well written, and each chapter is quite brief. It uses all of these different literary narrative structures as ways of telling this story, and I love it. It was one of my favorite books of 2021, and the people that I've pushed to read it have also loved it. There's true crime nonfiction books, like I know Bad Blood was a really big one. I haven't read it yet, but I hear amazing things. So if you're into listening to true crime podcasts, those could be good entry points. I would just generally say that nonfiction contains books about almost anything. So really go find a book about something that you are interested in. A lot of the nonfiction I choose to read deals with things like race and gender, but that's because those are things that interest me, and I know people who read completely different things. Hopefully that's a good introduction to some easy entry points into nonfiction if you're feeling intimidated by it. Think about what are the things that interest you, what are the things that intimidate you, and find a way around it. Talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts or feelings on anything I talked about in this video. And for your question of the day, give me your recommendation for a great entry point for nonfiction. If somebody is feeling intimidated by nonfiction, what is a place that you might recommend they start? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more, and if you want to support the work of the channel, check out the Patreon link down below, or check out channel memberships if you want sneak peeks at all of my upcoming video projects. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.